Humanhero saves Vulpine woman from drowning. What she does next is shocking. The river ran fast that spring, swollen by weeks of rain and the melting snows from the distant mountains. Marcus had walked the forest trail dozens of times before, carrying his bow and a satchel of supplies, but never had he heard the water roar so loud. It was as if the river had grown restless, eager to break its banks and devour the woods whole. He paused at a bend in the trail, scanning the rushing water below. That was when he saw it. Movement, frantic splashes that didn't belong to a drifting log or swirling current. His eyes narrowed, and his breath caught in his chest. It was a woman. No, something more than a woman. Her long ears, furred and tipped in russet, broke the surface as she fought against the pull of the water. Her tail, soaked and heavy, lashed wildly behind her, dragging her deeper. She gasped, coughed, and her golden eyes filled with terror as she was swept toward the jagged rocks jutting from the current. "Hold on!" Marcus shouted, though his words vanished in the roar. He dropped his bow and sprinted down the embankment, mud sliding beneath his boots. The icy spray of the river hit him as he plunged into the torrent without hesitation. The shock of the cold bit into his skin, but he pushed forward, arms cutting through the water until he reached her. She thrashed, panic overwhelming her strength. "Stop fighting me," he commanded, wrapping one arm around her chest and kicking furiously with his legs. "I've got you." The river seemed determined to claim them both, slamming them against the current and pulling them under. Marcus grit his teeth, forcing his body upward, lungs burning until at last they broke the surface. Inch by inch, he dragged her toward the shore, every muscle screaming in protest. Finally, his feet found the rocky bottom, and he hauled her onto the bank, collapsing beside her. She lay on the ground, coughing water from her lungs. Her tail sprawled across the grass like a sodden banner. Her chest rose and fell, her sharp ears twitching weakly. Marcus propped himself up, shivering, and brushed the wet hair from her face. "Are you alive?" he asked between gasps. Her eyes flicked open, piercing amber locked on his. For a long moment, she simply stared at him. Then, to his shock, her lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. "You risked your life," she rasped, her voice low, melodic yet edged with suspicion. "For me." Marcus sat back on his heels. "You were drowning. What was I supposed to do, watch?" The Vulpine woman pushed herself up, water dripping from her furred ears. She studied him, head tilting as if weighing invisible scales. Then, without warning, she reached forward and pressed her clawed hand against his chest. "You are human," she said, almost accusingly. "Humans and my kind are not allies. And yet, you saved me." Before Marcus could answer, she leaned closer, her nose brushing his throat as she inhaled deeply. A strange heat shimmered in her gaze when she pulled back, and he realized her expression had shifted. No longer gratitude, no longer suspicion, but something far more primal. Her tail flicked, sending droplets scattering. "Among my people," she whispered, "a life saved must be repaid in full." Marcus frowned. "That isn't necessary. I didn't do it for." His words cut off as her hand slid up, gripping the side of his face. Her claws grazed his skin lightly, not enough to harm but enough to remind him of the danger. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way. The russet fur, the sharp features, the wildness that radiated from every movement. Yet there was power in her, raw and untamed, that made his pulse quicken. "You don't understand," she said firmly. "My vow is binding. You saved my life. Now it belongs to you. As does everything else." The meaning of her words sank into him like a weight. "That's not what I want," Marcus said carefully. You don't owe me anything. Go home. Live your life. That's enough repayment. But she shook her head, water-dark hair clinging to her cheeks. You misunderstand again. My vow is not a choice, it is law. If I break it, the spirits of the river will take me instead. Do you see? He opened his mouth to argue but faltered at the intensity in her eyes. There was no jest, no trick. This was her truth. She crawled closer, her movements fluid, her tail curling behind her. So now I ask, human, what will you do with a vulpine life bound to you? The question was heavy with implication, but Marcus met her gaze steadily. Then come with me. Not as property, not as a debt, but as a companion. We'll find out what that means together. For the first time, her stern mask cracked. A small, startled laugh escaped her, and her sharp teeth flashed. Strange man. No human has ever spoken to me so. Maybe no human ever pulled you from a river before, he said, standing and offering his hand. She stared at it for a moment before placing her clawed fingers in his palm. He pulled her up, and for the first time, she stood beside him not as a creature he'd saved, but as an equal. The forest was silent now, as if waiting. She leaned close, her wet fur brushing his arm, and whispered, "Very well. I will walk with you. But be warned, Marcus. The life you've tied yourself to is not tame. It will shock you, test you, perhaps even break you." He gave her a tired smile. "After that river, I think I can handle it." And with that, the unlikely pair stepped back onto the trail, leaving the roaring waters behind, unaware of how profoundly their fates had just intertwined. The forest stretched endlessly before them, golden light breaking through the canopy as though the world itself approved of this strange bond. Marcus led the way along the muddy trail, but every so often he glanced back at the Vulpine woman, still dripping river water, still watching him with those piercing amber eyes. She walked with quiet grace, though her tail swayed like a banner in the breeze. At times she seemed to vanish into the shadows of the trees, only to reappear at his side as if the forest itself bent to her will. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "You should know my name, human. It is Celira." "Celira," Marcus repeated, the syllables strange yet beautiful on his tongue. Her ears flicked. "And yours?" "Marcus." "Marcus," she echoed softly, as though committing it to memory. Then, with sudden fierceness, she stopped and caught his wrist. "Do not mistake what has happened today. You are not merely my savior. You are my tether. Where you walk, I must walk. Where you fight, I must fight. And if you fall," she leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear, "then I fall with you." Marcus held her gaze. The weight of her vow pressed heavily upon him, but instead of fear, a strange sense of purpose filled his chest. "Then I suppose," he said quietly, "we'll have to make sure neither of us falls." Celira's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. Shocking words for a human. Perhaps you are not like the others after all. Hand in hand, they continued into the unknown, the roar of the river fading behind them. Their story had only just begun.